All right, this is Michelle. And Michelle, what do you do here at the title plant?
I'm an underwriter, and I pretty much determine whether or not the deals can close. I give information as to what's going on and how it can close.
So what are some of the things that come up that keep it from closing or that have to be resolved before it can close?
We deal with a lot of dead people.
Okay.
I should say I see dead people. But because of probates and things of that nature, family disputes, it can cause us to delay the closing or not be able to close at all.
So what do you need to resolve it? You need a death certificate?
A lot of times it's not just death certificates. We need to see whether or not there was any families other than the current family. So, for example, father got remarried, he had kids from the prior marriage, and he died without a will. So that means those kids come in as well. So we have to make sure that we know exactly who the heirs are.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of research in what you do.
Definitely, yes.
So you do residential sales mostly, right?
Commercial, residential, doesn't matter.
Both, okay.
Both.
And are you getting questions from the title company as well
Yes.
after you prepare all the documents?
Yes, a lot of times we get it from everyone. I talk to attorneys. I deal with all types of people who have never dealt with an attorney, and then people who have dealt with us, deal with us all the time. So,
So tell us about some of your most memorable closings.
Well, I've had some closings where at the 25th hour something has come up, or we've found out that there's more people involved that were not disclosed, and so sometimes I've had to look at obituaries and say, well, what happened to Ray? And then you get the deer in the headlights kind of thing, and it's like, oh, we have to get that information for you. So sometimes people are just unfortunately not as truthful, or they just don't tell you, so you have to ask specific questions, because if you don't ask the right question, you may not get the right answer. Right.
So do you do this alone, or do you have people helping you?
Well, I'm a part of a team, and our underwriting, I came from Dallas, and so I've also worked in claims with the company. So I'm a little bit more conservative in my underwriting because I've seen what can happen. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, it's like it's always good to bounce things off of other underwriters. So we all work together.
Okay, so tell us about some of those closings that didn't happen because of problems.
Good question. We had one most recently where the person passed away about 3 years ago, but the trust was in her name, and she was a beneficiary. So I was kind of like, did we do a seance, or did we visit the cemetery? Like, how did you get her as a part of this trust? And so the attorney who actually did the foreclosure for the HOA said, I sent her notice. I said, well, she died in 2011. You sent notice in 2013. Who did you send it to? Mm-hmm. So we could not close on the transaction because once a person passes away, whether they have a will or not, it goes to the devisees. The devisees at this particular transaction was her brother and sister. The sister never got noticed, so therefore the sister's interest was not foreclosed on, so we could not close. And the trust that was created in 2013 wasn't right. And so the person's like, oh, I can change it. I'm like, no, you can't. So we decided to decline actually closing that transaction.
So the only way to move forward with that is to purchase it without any title insurance, right?
That's correct. And some people do. I mean, you don't have to have title insurance, but it's letting you know exactly. It's assurance. It's telling you what you're getting. So it's kind of like going into the deal knowing with your eyes open versus going in there not knowing what's happening. Mm-hmm.
So if someone doesn't have title insurance and there's a problem, they could lose the property, right?
That is correct. Because if I'm an heir and you sell the property without me knowing, then I want my money, or I want the property back.
Right.
So yes.
So it wasn't ever truly foreclosed on.
That's correct. That is correct.
That is interesting. Any commercial sales that you've seen just turn out really messed up?
Well, we currently have one, and where the party had an easement. Well, they didn't have an easement. I asked about an easement agreement because they were selling the property but wanted to retain the easement, the billboard, which can be very, lucrative depending on where you're located. Sure. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, how are you guys going to get to? You're going to use a helicopter because you don't have an easement agreement. And so the seller was like, oh, wow, I do need to get that. And so anyway, the buyer didn't want that to happen. Oh. And so that, it's millions of dollars, and It didn't close because we're like, we need something of record, because then the seller can come back on us, and we're like, no. So have to be very careful.
Do you ever see people trying to sell landlocked property?
Yes, we do get that, and it's like, well, how are they going to get to it? Uh-huh. And so we will take exception to it and say, you don't have access. Mm-hmm. But again, sometimes people just, don't confuse me with the facts. My mind's made up. We want it. Yeah. So it just depends.
Tell me about some of the real estate scams that you see going on, because you uncover some scams, right?
That is correct. Like I said, a lot of times if we see someone really old and then we see like a really nice handwriting, usually that's probably not them. So we start to ask questions, or we find out that person has died, and it's like, oh, well, mom said I could have the house. Well, mom had 5 other kids. Unfortunately, we have to, make sure everyone is in agreement. So we see family fraud, we see corporation fraud, and we have to be very careful because people will, money is money. And then a lot of times we had situations where they leave the country, we can't get them. So
they just disappear.
Yeah, because they disappear with money, though, which is a good thing for them.
For them, right? Okay, so we talked about some memorable closings. We talked about, let's talk a little bit more about common title problems.
Okay.
What are some of the common problems that you see? Easements, obviously, are a big one.
Access is an issue. We deal with, a lot of times, you would think, oh, that property should have access, but they don't. We deal with issues with, like I said, probate. We deal with issues of fraud. We deal with issues of just people holding property and holding deeds and not recording them. So we can only deal with what's recorded.
Yeah.
So if someone's, a lot of times, especially older people, they'll have a deed. Oh, it's been my desk drawer for years. Well, it's not recorded of record. And so we have to, that's kind of like a wild deed out there. So we have to be careful about things like that because we don't know if it's not of record.
So then they provide it to you and you record it?
Yes, it has to be recorded in order to be recognized.
Do you see a lot of seller financing that never got recorded? It got paid off and then they never closed it?
Yes. We actually had an incident last week where the guy was his last name was Love, but he was very loving.
You weren't feeling the love.
There was no love there. But he was just like, you guys can't do that. But it was like, well, it was owner finance. So how would we know that he paid off your lien?
Right.
You didn't file a release. Mm-hmm. And so we have to, we asked for a release and things like that. And he was just very irate because he was like, why are you asking me? And it's like, because it's not done of record. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
So once it's cleared up, then you can provide a title policy.
That is correct. And we try our best to make sure that the title policies tell you exactly what you're getting.
And you go all the way back to the sovereignty of the soil. Tell me what that means exactly.
Well, a lot of times we go back to the acquisition. So it's like the 1900s, especially dealing with minerals. And in this area, it's not as bad, but if you're in Dallas, like the Barnett Shell and things like that, it can be a lot of, things that we need to make sure that the minerals, are, if they're severed from the property or if they're still there, who actually has rights. Because you can just own the surface of the property and not the soil. Right. So we have to be careful and say, well, you own this or this person owns this. And we need to make sure who has rights. So,
do you actually research the mineral rights?
I actually don't necessarily do the research per se. Sometimes on the minerals, I usually review what they provide me because more so the examiners are the ones who are doing all the research and then they bring it to me and if they have any specific questions.
So if you're buying land that has mineral rights, you kind of get whatever's on the title policy, but you would need to hire a landman to actually go research if there was any question about it, right?
That is correct. We will advise people to get a landman because they'll go all the way back and they'll find, sometimes you'll see things like they'll say, you may be an heir to blah, blah, blah. And so like it'll go farther back because we need to know who has a right to the property. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Do you ever see cemeteries being sold in land?
Yes, and we actually have to take exception to above and below. I'm joking. No, when we see cemeteries, we have to be very careful. We don't want poltergeist going on here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you have to provide easements for the families of the deceased, right?
Yes. A lot of times it's weird, but we just had one where they were buying the edge of or there was no bodies, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So we had to verify that to make sure that, we're not selling anything that has bodies. So it's kind of different.
Yeah. I bought some property that has a half-acre cemetery and it has bodies. Yeah, and it's on the survey, and
you have to. Yeah, it has to be noted.
Right,
I know what you're getting.
Yeah. It is interesting because the headstones go all the way back to the 1800s.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
You're not really supposed to move it.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I wouldn't move it.
Not if you want to sleep well at night.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't want to go near it. Okay, so let's see. What else do we? Oh, patents. Yeah. Tell me about patents and what work you do with patents.
Well, a lot of times it just depends because depending on the property and how far it's going back, we have to just, again, it's kind of like sometimes going back to the Spanish, acquisitions and things like that. It's just seeing who owns it and who, where it's been. It's kind of giving a roadmap to where it was before. So patents is just telling us who actually has any rights to that property. Okay. And it could be passed down. Sometimes we see families, it's been in the family since the 1900s. And so we just have to make sure we can find out who's still left, really.
And who are the big property owners from the 18 and early 1900s that people are buying land now? Is it like the big Moody plantation? What are the big names that you see?
Actually, it's a lot of that. I mean, when you think about like Sienna Plantation, things of that. I mean, just a lot. First of all, Texas is huge, as we all know, and so with dealing with the properties, the big families that own a lot of the real estate, they still have a lot of it. And so when you see the fields, and now you see all these residential properties popping up, they're giving parts of these properties now to residential. Before it was just farmlands and things like that. Now it's changed. So like you said, the Moody's, the Sienna Plantation heirs, things like that, they're kind of giving away. Even Shadow Creek. I mean, it's just a lot of that used to just be nothing.
Yeah.
So
very interesting. Well, you've got a really interesting job here.
I enjoy my job because you see so much.
And you enjoy research.
Yes, I do. I do.
What made you get into the title business?
Good question. I was interning in law school, and my attorney was an agent of Chicago Title. And I was like, what is this title stuff? And so you don't really understand it. Someone calls me and says, what's my GS number is? What is a GS number? So I started getting it's your file, and identifies your file. So again, when you don't know, so I started doing that, and I love real estate. So that's kind of how I got into it. So I've been doing it over 10 years now.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. Lots of great information. Appreciate it.
Hey, I have a question for you. Just how hot is your garage in the summer? Yep, thought so. Hot. Hot. And even hotter, right? So what if I told you that there's a product that can now help keep your garage cool? Introducing WindyVent, a revolutionary passive garage ventilation system that works off thermal airflow to allow free airflow in during hot summer months and can be closed to keep the cold out in the winter. WindyVents are sold in pairs and install in as little as 30 minutes. Get your revolutionary WindyVents today and say no to your hot garage. You don't have to leave your garage door up to cool your garage anymore. Vent it 24/7 with WindyVents. To get yours now, go to windyvent.com. Get 10% off your order. Just enter the word Shannon as your coupon code. Don't wait. Go to windyvent.com. Windyvent.com. That's 2 E's. windyvent.com. Installation not included. See windyvent.com for certified installers and for more information. Restrictions may apply. See website for details.